I think the fear that we have around issues of childhood and parenting today is actually related to our increasing expectation that we have some control over the fact that our children will survive us. 200 years ago, that terrible fear that we have today, the panic, the unthinkable that the child should predecease us, was an expected part of life. And so the whole framework of what was within a parent's control was much more limited. Powerful people, rich people, as well as poor people, could often expect their children to die in infancy, in early childhood, through adolescence. So if a child lived through up until 20, that was an unexpected treat. Now that changed over time, and certainly it increased by the late 19th century. But in the early 19th century, children dying was an expected part of a mother's experience. I think the change took place when we began to have a sense that we might actually expect our children to live. And that had a great deal to do with interventions of public health and changes in the society in the late 19th century. Various kinds of medical interventions, even more than that, public health things like clean water, pure milk, things that the public and the society could have some role in. And as that happened, the natural love that parents feel for their children, and that is some people will argue that in the past parents didn't love their children, but that's absolutely a canard. They did love their children, but what they could do with that love and the way they could frame that love around their children was very different than what we could expect today. And it was when when the expectation rose, that the anxiety also rose. Because as your appearance of power over your children's life increased, then your obsessiveness and anxiety over aspects of your children's lives could also increase. I would argue that looking at history will allow us to reconcile the dichotomy between the public responsibility and the private responsibility. Because historically, they actually grew together. That parents began to have the sense that they could do things for their children and had more control, as various kinds of public agencies, including public health, sanitation, and other kinds of agencies, operated to increase the life expectancy of the children. So the two actually came at the same time. What's happened over the last 20 or 25 years is there's an increasing imbalance, I would argue, between the public sense of responsibility towards children and the privatization of a kind of personal anxiety and sense of control over what the responsibilities of the parents are. Since the 1980s, that imbalance has become very marked. And so that part of what we experience as panic and the false sense that we have absolute control and therefore also absolute helplessness, those two things I think go together, I think is in part in response to the loss of outside assistance with our parenting. But if we look back historically, the two came together and grew together. And it's within the realm of our action to rebalance those two.